So after Gervonta Davis beat Ryan Garcia, I've been seeing loads of comparisons online between Mike Tyson and Gervonta Davis. Now, to some extent, from the outside looking in, they do have some similarities to some extent. Even just looking at their body dimension, they're both built like pit bulls. If you look at them both, they're both small, compact fighters that are punchers. But if you actually delve deep into it, although they're very similar, there's also differences between the two. Now, from a stylistic point of view, if you look at Mike Tyson generally is a fast starter. He's a fighter when, as soon as the bell rang, he would straight away just come at his opponent and actually put it on them. If you look at Gervonta Davis, right, Gervonta Davis in a lot of ways is kind of different from Mike Tyson in the sense that if you just watch the Ryan Garcia fight, if you watch it was Ryan Garcia that was pressuring Gervonta Davis. So when he starts his fights off, Gervonta Davis is usually a fighter that usually fights on the back foot. He's usually a fighter that's an outside fighter. Even though he has a shorter reach than his opponents, he's usually a fighter that fights on the outside, rather than a fighter that goes inside. So if you look at it from the outside looking in, they do look similar, but there are significant differences. Mike Tyson was an inside fighter. He's a fighter that was a pressure fighter. He was an aggressive counterpuncher, so he's a fighter that would come at you. He would force you to make mistakes as you're trying to keep him off you, and then with his head movement he would get inside and start putting it on you. Gervonta Davis is more of a traditional counterpuncher, so he's a fighter that would go on the back foot. He would wait for his opponent to make a mistake and then he would knock them out from the back foot. Now, obviously, there are other comparisons. The punching power is another one. If you look at Mike Tyson and Gervonta Davis, both of them punch extremely hard. Like, they've knocked out a lot of their opponents. Obviously, Gervonta Davis, in just his last two fights, he knocked out Rolly Romero. He knocked out, obviously, he stopped Ryan Garcia with a body shot. So both of them are like prolific punchers, and they're known for their actual punching power. But there are certain similarities as well, like differences as well. I feel like Mike Tyson fights with more rage and intensity, and he burns his energy more earlier. So he's a fighter that during the first 6 rounds, he's going to put absolute hell on his opponents. He's going to literally go for hell for leather. While if you look at Gervonta Davis is more cerebral and circumspect. He's not a fighter that will burn all of his energy in the first 5-6 rounds. He's more of a fighter that's that you can argue that in a way Gervonta Davis paces himself better. Mike Tyson was a fighter that he would literally go hell for leather in the first 6 rounds. That's why he had so many first round, second round, third round knockouts, was because he would go hell for leather in the first round and in a weird way blow his load. But Gervonta Davis is, if you look at him, even though they're both punchers, Gervonta Davis was a fighter that would actually have his KOs a lot later on. So his KOs would usually happen mid fight or towards the later rounds. So they're quite, and also Gervonta Davis, when he used to score his knockout, it was usually on the back foot. So he'll be counter punching. If you look at the Rolly Romero fight, Romero came at him and then he landed a shot and then he got out of the way. So he's usually counter punching when his opponents are coming in, and that's usually how he scores his knockouts. So if you look at it from that perspective, there are, even though they're very similar, they're quite different as well. Their body dimension, like I mentioned before, they're very kind of short, compact, very short and compact. But if you look at Mike Tyson, when he was coming inside, he would have this head movement where he'll be it's almost like his head movement was on a pendulum. It'll be going left and right, constantly swinging left and right. Gervonta Davis has got more of a passive guard. So his guard, he does use head movement. He does move his head, but his head movement is more based on reacting to his opponent's punches, so it's more reflex driven. So Gervonta Davis has got a head movement, but his head movement is not prolific and consistent the way Mike Tyson's is. Gervonta Davis's head movement is more reactive, so he's more like Mayweather in his head movement. So he'll move his head in reaction to his opponent's punches. Well, Mike Tyson was someone who, like, if you used to watch him with Kevin Rooney, every time he would throw a punch, he would try moving his head each time. So if he throws a left hook, he'll move his head 3 times. If he throws an uppercut, he moves his head 5 times. So his head movement is more consistent and constant. While with Gervonta Davis' head movement is more based on he'll move his head in reaction to his opponent's punches. So Gervonta Davis is in terms of his reflexes and head movement is more like Mayweather than he is like Mike Tyson. There's been loads of people that have said online that Gervonta Davis is almost like a mix between Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather, and to some extent I can see it. Mike Tyson was also a fighter that used to throw quite a few punches, so he was more like a punches in bunches type of guy. So he'll throw 3-4 punch combinations, he'll set you up with several punches, while Gervonta Davis is more like a one punch knockout artist. So he'll land one shot and just have you out, more than Mike Tyson. Not saying Mike Tyson didn't have one punch knockout power, he did, but he was more of a combination guy. He was more of a guy that would throw several punches to stun you, while Gervonta Davis was more of a guy that would land one shot that would just completely discombobulate your whole senses. So there are differences, even though they're quite similar, there's differences as well. Another thing to make sense of it is the fact that if you look at it, if you look at their backstories are quite similar as well. If you look at Mike Tyson grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Back then, Brownsville was one of the most destitute, poverty-filled ghettos in America. And if you look at Gervonta Davis is from Baltimore. Baltimore is one of the most crime-ridden murder capitals in America. So to some extent, they're both fighters that have come from nothing. They're both fighters that are kind of similar, but they're also different. But tell me what you think. I remember there was a tweet where Gervonta Davis replied to Mike Tyson, and he said he's got more skills than Mike Tyson. And to some extent, he can make a case that he does, because I feel like Gervonta Davis can box better than Tyson can, but Tyson is a better pressure fighter. So Gervonta Davis can box on the back foot, he can counter punch. A lot of times he's outboxing fighters that have got longer reach than him. To be able to do that, you need a lot of skills. And Gervonta Davis usually is at a disadvantage when it comes to height and reach. He's managing to outbox fighters that are taller and have a longer reach than him. That shows his boxing ability. Well, I think Mike Tyson has got better pressure fighting ability. He's a fighter that could pressure fight much better than Gervonta Davis can. So he can literally pressure you towards the ropes and have you swinging and like missing, and he's more of a pressure fighter than Gervonta Davis is. So that's just my opinion. Tell me your opinion. What do you think is the similarities, and what do you think is the differences between Mike Tyson and Gervonta Davis? I think there's a lot of similarities, but they're fundamentally different fighters. Obviously they're both punchers. Obviously they're both short and compact for their weight class. Obviously they both have a similar kind of background, upbringing, like they both came from the streets. But there's also differences, especially stylistically, between the two. But yeah, tell me what you think below. Tell me what you think. Is there differences between Gervonta Davis and Mike Tyson, or do you think what I'm saying is complete nonsense and they're essentially the same fighter? I think there's differences between the two. I think they're both extremely talented, but they're both different. And I think Mike Tyson is probably a more exciting fighter, but Gervonta Davis is one of the most exciting fighters in boxing at this moment in time. The amount of knockouts that he gets, the amount of times he stops his opponents, he's incredibly exciting. I just wish he would get in there with better level opposition. But tell me what you think below. Do you think there's any differences between the two, or do you think they're essentially the same fighter? Tell me below.